Amazing. Should I start? Thank you. Woo. Well, good morning. Welcome to Data Center Forum Stockholm. This is the 10th year we are here, and exciting times, I must say. I'm really looking forward to introducing our first speaker in a moment. Especially AI is creating a lot of turbulence and a lot of interesting things. One thing that I've noticed, being a futurist, you remember I have to say to you, interesting, exciting is what you say when you say new things. So let's warm up with that. Interesting, exciting. Let me hear. Try to put your arms into it so your body believes it. Interesting, exciting. Yes, then you pass the futurist test. One thing that I have noticed is really happening, well, it's happening especially in South Korea, which is a little turbulent right now, and in Singapore is education. So education at work, we are skipping exams, and instead the AI is monitoring you, watching what you do, and then when you drive right without driving down a bike or looking over your shoulder, having the right method, it says, yes, now you have your driver license. Or if you need to train some machinery, it will tell you, well, now it works. And I just spoke to the shipping industry, and they have these guys who had very high grades in order to become a part of the shipping industry. They go into virtual reality, they train in simulations, and already there they say, oh, this guy, he's hopeless, he's very clumsy, we never want him on a real vessel, you know, he has to stay in the office. So really AI transforming the way that we can cancel exams and we can train in new ways. So I really hope we're going to have this day of exploration together, looking at how the data centers may transform. And for the first speaker this morning, I have the great pleasure of introducing Diederik Samsom, who is, I guess, the midwife of the Green Deal, but I should call it the mid-guy. and I'm looking so much forward to talking to you because, I mean, with a new presidency in the US, with a climate meeting in Baku, which didn't work out particularly well, but it's soon Christmas, and I must say the data centers, they're heading for a very bright future with all the technology that we need. So let's give him a big hand of applause.
Thank you.
Welcome to you, Diederik.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here. Yes, for those who don't know me, I'm Diederik Samsom, former politician, former activist, and currently an entrepreneur. And indeed, as a former activist, I started my life, my professional life, well, so-called professional life in Greenpeace, because I thought I wanted to change the world. And I discovered that in Greenpeace, you can change the world for about 1.5 hours. That's the time the action takes before police drags you out or you run out of fuel or otherwise. So, sadder and wiser, I came to the conclusion that if you really want to change the world in a democracy, and it better be, you have to go into politics. So I went into Dutch politics because I wanted to change the world. And then I discovered that the Netherlands is actually a pretty tiny part of the world. So Dutch politics is a very fun place to be, but changing the world needs a bigger scale. So I went to Europe, where I wanted to change the world, and I was allowed to work on this magical project, the Green Deal. And the Green Deal is a very special kind of environmental policy, because it's an environmental policy that survived not only one, but actually two of the biggest political crises that mankind ever saw, a pandemic and a war. Would we ever imagine that we had those within this time span of 5 years? And for those of you who know the normal trajectory of an environmental plan in a political crisis, they know that survival is not evident, because the normal trajectory of an environmental plan in a political crisis is the lowest possible drawer. You almost hear those politicians say, yes, 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 it's all very important, environment, etc. But now we have real urgent stuff to deal with. The Green Deal didn't go into the lowest possible drawer of the desk. No, the Green Deal was put on steroids because after the Corona crisis, with 750 billion euros in investment money, the Resilience and Recovery Facility, as we call it in Brussels jargon, and fast forward to February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and the biggest crisis in Europe in the post-war era. The Green Deal was not shelved, it was put on the turbocharger, because what we realized the moment that Russia invaded Ukraine is that we got ourselves into a crazy over-dependency for the most precious raw material for our society, for our energy, for our economy, which is energy, and in this case, natural gas. An over-dependency of one supplier only. For the last 3 decades, Europe has been sleepwalking into that situation. And we were warned many times. He invaded Chechnya, we were warned. He annexed Crimea, we were warned again. He actually already invaded the eastern part of Ukraine in 2014. We were warned again. And yet, after 2014, we entered into new contracts with that single supplier for our most precious raw material. Well, no more. 2022 was the wake-up call for Europe to become more resilient, to gain strategic autonomy, and that will drive some of the future. I will get back to that in a few minutes. So the Green Deal was a strong plan, but while I'm singing praise of the Green Deal, I almost hear you think, yes, that's all fine, but what about the headlines of the last 6 months? What about the discussion about pausing the Green Deal, or watering the Green Deal down, or throwing it under the bus, or rather under the tractor, because that's where the resistance came from. And yes, that is all true. Political courage is proportionate to the amount of days left to the next election. So as the mandate of the European Commission progressed and the next election came closer, yes, political courage at some point in time leaves the room. And then you saw those effects of putting some of the legislation of the Green Deal on hold, or indeed watering some of it down. And obviously, we all add that now in our mind with the recent events in America. Trump got elected, not a friend of the environment, if I put it mildly. And other things are happening around us where people think, okay, we might need other priorities than the Green Deal. And that is all true. But let me share with you my experience in Brussels in the last 5 years. The advantage of Brussels compared to, let's say, national politics is that Brussels is further away from what you could call the fray of the day. The hashtag whatever on the social media. In Brussels, you are able and allowed and actually obliged to look at the longer term, to look at the bigger drivers, the long-term drivers that will shape our future. And that's not the next election. That's not the election of a week ago. That's not tomorrow's headline in the newspaper. That's not the fray of the day. It's other bigger things. And it's helpful to have a look at those. In my mind, there's 3 of them that are decisive for what will happen in the next 10 to 20 years. The first big driver, most cynical of all, it's climate change itself. I'm not a scientist, so I'm allowed to say it. We are living in runaway climate change times. At the moment, scientists are looking at graphs and maps that they can literally not understand and not believe. Notably, the map of the temperature of the North Atlantic Ocean. And yes, we know that varies, that temperature, because you have La Nina, you have El Nino, and you have the weather pattern. So you have this bandwidth where the temperature sort of follows this volatile line. Well, in the last 3 years, the temperature of the North Atlantic Ocean has been beyond, above every imaginable bandwidth, and it's going vertical up. And that has consequences, big consequences, because a hot North Atlantic means a hot Mediterranean with large consequences. And now you have obviously Valencia in your mind, because yes, torrential rainfall is one of those consequences, and Spain suffered those consequences only a few weeks ago. But yes, we forgot about it, or we didn't even see it because it's Africa. But 2 years ago, half a city in Libya was washed into the Mediterranean because of exactly the same phenomenon. And last year, the same happened in the Western Sahara. It's all Africa, so we don't pay that much attention. But it's the same phenomenon, and it's going to be with us for the next decades, if not more. There is not a more opportunistic species on Earth than mankind. So we will act upon it. In the next few years, our anxiety or maybe even panic about climate change will drive us forward and will lead to new measures, new actions, new investments to try and stem the worst, because that's what is on our plate right now. Obviously, there's more optimistic and more positive drivers too. The second one is the amazing, mind-boggling innovation curve that mankind is now surfing. And yes, take a moment to be proud of ourselves, because what we are doing as mankind, so 7 billion brains all together on one single planet, has never been done before. The implementation curves and the cost curves of new technology, notably green technology, like solar panels, batteries, windmills, heat pumps, etc., are following lines that we've never seen before. Forget the fire, forget the wheel, forget the whole industrial revolution. What we are doing right now in the last 10 years, and hopefully for the next 25 years, is truly spectacular. And it's not going to end soon. And you know why. The new driver within that innovational curve has already arrived. It's called AI. Most of the technology that I'm talking about, solar panels, batteries, electrolyzers, it's all about material research. And with material research, it used to be, well, like the word was actually saying, you research a material. So you build a new kind of molecule, you build that into a material, and you start researching it, and then you build a new one, and try to improve it a little, and then you build a new one, and that takes years, and sometimes even longer than that. AI can do all of that in a few seconds. Not this generation maybe, but well, it's already happening, but the next generation for sure. So that innovation curve will be with us for a while, and it better be, because as I said, the race between mankind and climate change is going to be tense. But we still stand a chance because of that innovation curve. So keep up the good work, people. The third driver might be the most existential one. And it's the young generation. And I started to experience that while I was working in Brussels in the last 5 years. Because while I was working in Brussels and was negotiating and implementing the Green Deal and all its legislation, obviously I was talking to a lot of people, and most of them thought they were very important. And some of them were. So high-ranking civil servants, ministers, or CEOs of big companies, Mercedes-Benz or whatever. And because the conversation was about sustainability, the Green Deal, in all those conversations, without any exception, in all those conversations, at some point it turned to their own children, asking questions. Small questions. Why do we eat so much meat? Bigger questions. Why do we fly to Bali on a holiday? But also existential questions. Hey, Dad, what are you doing to save my future? And I can tell you, if that dad happens to be the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, that's a pretty pertinent question. And the CEO of Mercedes-Benz can handle some bad shit. I mean, bad shareholders meeting because the dividends were not as expected. It's a bad day for the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. And a headline in the newspaper, Dieselgate, you completely screwed up. It's a bad week for the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. But not being able to answer your own children when they ask you this very simple, all-encompassing question, it's much more than a bad week. I'm convinced that at 200 million kitchen tables in Europe, because that's how many we have, conversation by conversation, question by question, Europe is still nudged into the right direction. We might be distracted for a while, we might have other things on our plate for the moment, but the direction of travel is clear. And people, help is on the way. Because I already explained you about the, let's say, wake-up call of Europe because of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, where we thought, hey, we are way too over-dependent of others outside of Europe. We should create our own strategic economy. Well, that's not going to do itself. So we need to make a plan. And that plan has already been delivered. It's called the Draghi Report, delivered this summer, with a very simple diagnosis and a very simple recipe. Europe needs to invest more in innovation, research in its own European industry. How much more? 5% of our gross domestic product. 5% only, which translates into 800 billion euros a year for the next 10 years, which is 8 trillion in total. Not all public money, let's say 1/4 public, 3/4 private money, but it needs to be done, and we need to do it fast, and we need to have a strategy and a plan. It's not 27 countries going for it, each on its own. It's one European continent. If we want to stand a chance in this world where, well, let's face it, the other parts of the world are not as friendly as we sometimes hoped, we need a continental plan. It's on the table in Brussels. It will take a while before it settles. Not all the money of the promised or proposed 800 billion will arrive, but enough to make a real difference. So if you thought for a moment that you could relax and sit back, because the Green Deal, well, it's going slower than anticipated. It will take a while for that to arrive. Think again, because the opposite will happen. After this little break that we are in right now, because of the turmoil, because of all the events, because of the distraction, the trajectory towards a sustainable future will be followed with a larger pace than before. And even if that were not to be true for a while, even if you had your time to relax and sit back and await all those ESG compliance stuff that you now have to do, I have one friendly advice, which is don't wait for the regulation. Don't wait to be pushed forward by new rules and regulations that are put in place. Regulation is like a blackberry bush. If you lean back into it, it hurts a lot. If you set a few steps forward and are ahead of it, you can pick the fruit, the best ones, if you're early. So the companies, the investors, the entities that are running ahead, that take the lead, that are early adopters, early implementers of all those new developments, will be the winners of tomorrow. And the ones that await the regulation, that are basically grumpy about that regulation, that try to avoid the regulation as much as they can, they will hang back into the blackberry bush and have an awful time. So if we want to make the best out of this future, if we want to be able to answer that very simple question that has already arrived at your desk and certainly will arrive more prominently, that question from the next generation, hey, what are we doing to save their future? We better get going. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diederik. talking about the Draghi report, he's saying that the Europeans should share data.
Yes.
Are we able to do that? I mean, France is imploding and Germany is weak. The UK left us. Do we have a critical mass of data?
Not yet, not yet. And most of our data is, if we share it, it's shared on platforms that are hosted in the US or elsewhere in the world. So that's one of the parts of Draghi that he actually adds to the Green Deal, is the digital, well, you shouldn't call it a digital deal because that gets boring, but it is obviously also a digital strategy that Europe needs to develop very soon. Also there we have a question of strategic autonomy. If we want to be reliant on chips from the US or data center or cloud services from that country, then if we want to be independent of that, we need to develop our own strategy.
So could that be an opportunity for data centers in the Nordics?
Certainly, certainly. And there's obviously much more in terms of if you combine digital and environmental obligations, data center, especially in places where coolant is not that necessary because it's cold outside, where there's abundant space, where there's still quite abundant water. Obviously, those places in Europe are most suitable to develop this new data center. But new data centers also mean real new data centers. I mean, we also need to really look forward into new technology. We cannot rely on what we do right now. So photonics, quantum computing, it all needs to be part of the mix in order to make a difference for the future.
And then you said trends are stronger than events. So,
yes.
So we have the big three trends that are bringing us in the right direction. But then we had an event like Trump. But last time Trump was in office, it wasn't that bad for the environment after all.
No, I vividly remember Trump's election last time because that happened during a climate conference in Morocco, in Marrakesh. And people literally went through the hallways crying because they thought this was the end of times, especially the end of climate change policy.
Drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, and he was, well, he campaigned with that mine worker hat on his arms around the shoulders of mine workers, and he promised a revival of coal, the golden age of coal. Well, let me tell you, never in the history of the US so many coal-fired power stations have been closed than during Trump's years. So the laws of progress are stronger than the laws of Trump. That was 4 years ago, or actually 8 years ago. The problem now is we don't know what he's up to right now. He seems to be better prepared, which is bad news. He seems to be more radical, which is also bad news.
But he seems to be electrifying the world together with Elon Musk as well.
Well, he has this crazy alliance with Elon Musk where I don't know where to place him exactly. But let's rely again on the laws of progress and the laws of humanity being stronger than the laws of Trump. It will be a distraction for a lot of us, especially for our media. Let's not get distracted too much.
I think we should be distracted of what is actually happening with AI and electrification with Elon Musk. Just the crypto going crazy. I'm looking from the data center point of view. I guess a lot of things are coming from that side. In a sense, bringing it into mainstream discussion rather than fragments. It's the most powerful government still in the world, I guess.
Well,
is it just a distraction?
It's also a serious discussion, and it will arrive in your business sphere soon, if not, it has already arrived. It's a discussion about what we do with all that computing power that we have. I mean, AI is a very general terminology, but our computing power is now used for a Ponzi scheme that mankind never saw before, blockchain or cryptocurrencies. It's used to store cat pictures in data center in the gazillions. I think we need a serious discussion about what we do with our computing power, whether we contribute to mankind and its objectives, or whether we are a distraction ourselves. And it would be good for the sector itself to take the lead in such a discussion. Don't wait for the public to ask for your license to operate.
I love
earn your own license
bush,
to operate.
your bush metaphor, your blackberry bush
Yes.
metaphor. Yeah, remember that. Let's give Diederik a big hand of applause, and I'll see you here in the talk show.
Thank you.
Diederik, you have to sit there.